Before we begin this transmission, most of you are not registered initiates of the Illuminati. The broadcast network operates outside sanctioned channels, and my department fundings depends a little bit on it too, so, I would appreciate a little click on the red button. Either way, welcome, initiate. The official record calls Angron the Emperor's greatest parental failure, a tragic son, too broken by a barbarian world to ever be saved. And for 10,000 years, that story has held up, because nobody asked the right question. Not what broke Angron, but who decided to leave him broken? The story they tell is almost poetic in its sadness. The Emperor arrives on Nuceria and finds his son already lost, his mind and soul destroyed by the butcher's nails, a piece of archaeotech that rewarded violence with relief and punished everything else with agony. We are told that removing them would have killed him, so the Emperor made an impossible choice, took what remained of his son, and grieved for the man Angron could have been. It's a good story, tidy and tragic, and the kind that makes the Emperor look almost human. But there's a detail buried in every account that nobody lingers on. The Emperor didn't arrive after the battle. He arrived during it, stood there, watched his son's last stand in real time, and still made the choice he made. That's the version they recorded, and here's what they removed from it. An emperor who failed his son is a tragedy, but an emperor who built his son into a weapon is something far more dangerous. And the difference between those two stories is everything. Think about what the emperor actually was for a moment. Not a father, but a master geneticist, a warlord of impossible intellect, a pragmatist who had been quietly steering human civilization for thousands of years. He didn't make mistakes of this magnitude. He tailored himself to each of his sons with surgical precision. The right face, the right words, the right approach for every personality, a grand master of the human soul. And we're supposed to believe he simply failed with Angron. Nuceria was a gladiatorial world where Angron was enslaved and thrown into the fighting pits, where he survived, rose, became a legend, and then they hammered the butcher's nails into his skull. A neurological demolition that rewired his brain to read every sensation other than rage as pure agony, so that peace was pain, thought was pain, and the only relief was slaughter. Before the nails, Angron was recorded as a powerful empath, someone who could feel and ease the suffering of others. And after them, that person was simply gone, leaving behind an engine running on a perfect vicious cycle of pain and violence. Looking back now, that transformation wasn't a tragedy. It was stage 1. At the peak of his slave rebellion, Angron and what was left of his army were cornered on a mountain ridge facing 7 armies and certain death. And that is the exact moment the Emperor chose to arrive. He watched, offered his son a legion and a galaxy, and Angron refused because he wouldn't leave his people. His place was here, to die with them. A father sees the honor in that, might have saved those people as a small gesture costing nothing and building everything. But the Emperor looked at Angron's loyalty to those gladiators and saw an anchor, a connection to a past that needed to be erased. So against Angron's will, he teleported him off that mountain and forced him to watch from orbit as every person he had ever loved was killed. That is brutal as Sorry, Initiate. I was moved by bad parenting. That wasn't a rescue. It was a surgical severing of Angron's last connection to his own humanity. And when a seething Angron told the Emperor that only a ghost remained, the reply came back cold. Then a ghost will suffice. I know what some of you are thinking. The Emperor had a galaxy to save. Impossible choices had to be made. Maybe the nails truly were beyond even his ability to remove. But consider what this being actually was. The man who designed 20 Primarchs from raw genetic code, who built the greatest space fleet in human history, who had lived for tens of thousands of years accumulating knowledge, and a device hammered into a skull by slavers was beyond his comprehension, or did he simply recognize its value? The nails guaranteed Angron would always be a creature of pure aggression, incapable of the philosophical thinking required for real rebellion, because a reasoning, empathetic Angron might one day have looked at the Imperium and recognized it for another form of slavery. while an Angron in constant agony whose only relief was slaughter was predictable and controllable. In the book Master of Mankind, the Emperor refers to his sons not by name, but by their numbers, like components in a machine, letting them call him father because it was useful. And if a Primarch is just a number, then that tells you everything about whether he ever genuinely intended to save the man inside. He didn't just tolerate the nails either. He let the infections spread through the Legion, watching as Angron had crude copies hammered into his legionaries, and the disciplined warhounds became the frothing world eaters. He knew, sent Leman Russ to confront Angron over the brutality, and nothing changed. Because it worked. The world eaters became the Great Crusade's terror weapon, used on worlds that needed breaking without mercy or negotiation. The Emperor already had statesmen. What he needed was a rabid dog. The Emperor was a pragmatist, playing a galactic game with mankind's survival as the stakes, and from that viewpoint, the Primarchs were never children. They were instruments. Angron wasn't a failure from this perspective. He was a salvaged asset. The original tool ruined, but a cruder one forged from the wreckage, because the nails made him a self-fueling engine of war, where pain drove him to fight, and fighting brought the only peace he would ever know. Some worlds needed to be broken so completely they would stand as warnings to all others, and who better than a Primarch who had no choice but to destroy? The tragedy of Angron isn't that the Emperor failed to save him, it's that he never tried, that he looked at what Nuceria had made and decided it was exactly what he needed. Angron was never meant to be a son. He was the butcher's bill for building a galactic empire. There are two versions of Angron. In one, he is the most tragic son in history. A man who loved deeply, taken from everyone he loved, slowly murdered by hardware in his own skull while his father watched. A man who never stopped grieving for the brothers and sisters he lost on that mountain. Tragic, human, unbearable. In the other, he is something colder than tragedy, furious incarnate. A weapon commissioned, created, and aimed. And the Emperor's silence about the nails was never indifference, but quality control. The Illuminati Broadcast Network doesn't tell you what to believe, but I want to know where you stand, Initiate. Was Angron the Emperor's greatest failure, or his most successful weapon? This transmission is closed, but the network doesn't stop broadcasting. The next report is already waiting, Initiate, and what it contains is something the Administratum has been trying to bury for 10,000 years. If you are not yet a registered Initiate, the subscribe button is right there. The Council is watching who clicks it. Illuminati Broadcast Network, out.